Hi there everyone, my name's Dave West. I hope we're all doing well. So welcome back to the ultimate video test, and today I'm checking out the Oppo Find X3 Pro in daylight conditions. Now I've already done a low light test with the Oppo Find X3 Pro, and I'll leave a link at the end of the video so you can go and check that out in your own time. Now, as with all ultimate video tests, I'll leave all of the main camera specifications down in the description and just run through some of the high level features throughout the video to help save you some time. So we're starting off with the front facing camera, and this is a 32 megapixel fixed focus camera which bizarrely can only record video at up to 1080p at 30 frames per second. Now I know it is actually capable of more. You can get up to 3K using apps like Filmic Pro or Open Camera, but as far as stock software goes, we're just stuck at 1080p at 30 frames per second. Now it does have electronic image stabilization and also stereo sound recording from its built-in microphones. Now just moving around, just looking at the sky behind me there, you can see there's some blowout in the clouds. If I do move, it kind of tries to adjust, but it's still not ideal. You do get a lot of highlight blowout. You can see if I just move the camera just slightly, you can start to see some shape in the clouds, but then it just blows it out completely in favor of the auto exposure on my face. Alright, so one of the options available for the front facing camera is the ultra steady mode. So it's 1080p at 30 frames per second again, however it crops in and uses a much more aggressive image stabilization method to give you super smooth video. Now I can see through the viewfinder, it's actually really nice and smooth, so kind of wobbling the phone around because of this unsteady ground I'm walking on. It does keep the edges and the background nice and stable. Alright, so the last option available for the front facing camera is video portrait mode. Now I tried this out in low light conditions, and whilst by no means perfect, the effect was pretty good. Now we're out in daylight conditions, you can obviously see how a good light benefits this kind of mode on the Oppo Find X3 Pro. Got a nice blurred background. I still think it looks a little bit too cutty-outy for my liking. There's no sense of gradual blur into the background. But obviously with this being a fixed focus front camera, it's doing all of this in software, so I suppose it's quite difficult to achieve that kind of natural blur effect into the background. Alright, so moving on to the rear cameras then. We're starting off with the ultra-wide camera, 4K at 30 frames per second. Now, if you want to watch in 1080p, just go into the YouTube quality menu and drop it down to 1080p. There's so much to go through in the video, I don't want to make it overly long, but if you do want to see a 1080p video sample, I'll be happy to upload that if that's what you'd like to see. So this is the ultra-wide camera, and this is a 50 megapixel autofocus camera. And this can record video at up to 4K at 60 frames per second, and it has electronic image stabilization to keep everything nice and smooth. Now whilst it has autofocus, it doesn't have optical image stabilization like the main camera, which I'll switch to in a moment. But just looking at the ultra-wide field of view, it does look pretty good. Now with these conditions it's quite difficult with some phones because lots of dark, gloomy, shadowy areas, but I think the ultra-wide camera is doing a pretty good job in my opinion. So switch to the main camera. Now this is also a 50 megapixel camera, and this has optical image stabilization and once again can record video up to 4K at 60 frames per second. Now the good thing is on the Oppo Find X3 Pro, both of the rear lenses are exactly the same, so they're both a Sony IMX766 sensor, so color accuracy wise they're very similar, so that's good for when you're taking photos, and also the same switches over into video mode as well. And one thing I've noticed, if we just look at this tree branch here, the highlights are quite blown out, so it's kind of cutting through the tree branch. It's not quite ideal. If I move the phone around, you can see it just auto adjusts slightly to compensate for that. Now it's alright taking phones out in nice bright sunny conditions, but I think slightly gloomier conditions are perhaps sometimes a better test to show you just how well the dynamic range copes with different kinds of weather conditions. Now, a good chance here to check out the microphone quality. We could also switch on the fly to the 13 megapixel zoom camera. So this has 2 times optical zoom and also up to 5 times hybrid zoom, which you can see is not ideal. The image is overly smooth, it's got a lot of kind of oil painting effects. But 2 times zoom is still pretty decent. The one thing to mention is that the zoom camera can film up to 4K at 30 frames per second, and if you want to use 4K 60, all it simply does then is crop in off the main sensor to get 60 frames per second video using the zoom camera. But you still get electronic image stabilization on the zoom lens, you can see here, and careful footsteps does mean it looks pretty good. So back to the main camera and then ultra wide. Now, because of the electronic image stabilization, you do get a slightly more cropped in view from the ultra wide camera, but you can still get enough into the lens to cram in more scenery, which is cool. We'll just give you a comparison from the ultra wide to the wide lens. It's not a huge amount of difference, but it does allow you to get a little bit more into the frame, which is cool. Alright, so 4K at 60 frames per second then. Now we'll just go over this bridge and check out the water, so you get more lifelike movement now with the water at 4K 60. Now, one thing I find very impressive with the Oppo Find X3 Pro is that the video footage is really smooth and nicely rendered and encoded. So some phones tend to stutter a little bit when you're doing hand movements and things like what I'm doing now. However, the processing on the Oppo Find X3 Pro is nice and smooth, and you get hardly any jitters that I've noticed anyway when recording video. So I just wanted to show you that the ultra wide lens does have autofocus. You can see it kind of blurs into the background there, and then we can push and it'll focus on the background, push again and it'll go onto the leaves in front of me. So it's good to have that feature on this ultra wide angle camera. Helps you get these sort of super wide main point of focus here at the front, and then the wide field of view blurred out in the background. Okay, switch to the main lens now. Now, one thing I just need to mention is that if you're recording at 60 frames per second, if you want to switch lenses, you have to stop recording and start again. I'm not sure why that is, but you can't switch cameras on the go. Alright, so here's the main lens then. And again, nice smooth video even when I pan. If I focus on this here, if I just push the zoom camera, so again, this is now cropping, so it's giving you a 2 times magnification of the main lens for 4K 60, and I can go all the way up to 5 times, and you can see quite sort of fuzzy details at 5 times zoom. And then back to the main camera. And you can see there it gets nice smooth lock on subjects. although sometimes it gets a little bit confused when things are moving around, but still, when it does get a lock, it tries its best to really keep up with that. As you can see, it's quite struggling there. But that is the main and ultra wide camera plus crop zoom at 4K at 60. Okay, so another mode available, which is in the more option in the camera UI, is this dual view video mode. So it allows you to record video at up to 1080p at 30 frames per second using both the front and the main rear camera. Try not to get caught on a nettle bush. Now, the good thing is when you're using this mode is that on the main camera you can still use the zoom effect while still recording with the selfie camera in the background, which is pretty nifty. One thing I would have liked is if you'd be able to switch on the fly between the kind of viewpoint that you're seeing. So like with the Oppo X3 Pro, for example, that allows you to toggle between the two, so it kind of flips what you're seeing. But never mind, it's nice to have this mode available anyway. So this is what I was talking about. You can do it, but you can't do it while recording videos. So now I've had to stop recording and then flip the cameras around. So now we're on the selfie is the main event, so to speak, and then you've got the main camera in that little round bubble up on the top of the screen there. And there's three different options. So you have the first one, which I showed you at the start of this segment of the video, and you've got this one with the round bubble, and then we've got this last option here, sorry, which is a split of the two, so you're just getting a split screen. And again, if you stop recording and press the flip button, it then moves the viewpoint and swaps between the two. Another mode available on the rear camera is ultra steady video mode. Now, this has been around for a while on many different smartphones, and what it does is uses the ultra wide camera, crops in, and then uses the information around the edges of the frame, which you can't see, to give you this super stabilized video. Now, it only allows you to record at up to 1080p at 30 frames per second, so quality isn't the greatest, but in good conditions like this, I say good, the weather's pants, but in brighter conditions like this, I should say, you can get some pretty decent results. And it does seem like you're kind of glued to rails when you're recording video this way. So when you're recording just with the normal electronic image stabilization, there's a little bit of bounce in your footsteps, but with this, it kind of replicates a gimbal or kind of steady cam effect with the image stabilization. And then you've got Ultra Steady Pro mode, which I think is just a little bit steadier again. And again, it's 1080p at 30 frames per second, but it does give you some really good stable video at the same time. Okay, so just to give you an idea of how the portrait mode works on the rear camera, I'm just going to record myself with the rear camera this way, and hopefully this will give you an idea of how it looks using the rear lenses. So because the rear lenses have autofocus, it does give this mode a slight advantage over the front-facing camera, which is just using all software to achieve that kind of effect. But I wanted to include this as part of the video, just to give a demo of the portrait mode using the rear camera. Now, it's 1080p at 30 frames per second. And again, like the front-facing camera, what it's doing is it's taking 30 portrait shots a second and then making them into a video. It's a pretty impressive effect, I think. And you can toggle the bokeh level. I just leave it as the standard is 60%, so when you switch on the mode, it automatically applies 60% bokeh. You can go up to 100 or less if you want, but I just think the default option is more than good enough for the portrait mode. Alright, so that's the end then of the ultimate video test for the Oppo Find X3 Pro. So I'm filming this last bit using the ultra wide camera, and I've just turned the phone around to film myself. Again, not ideal conditions, but I think it's good to mix things up and record in slightly less than ideal conditions to show you how the phone performs in this kind of slightly gloomier weather. So if you've got any comments or questions about anything you've seen in this video, please leave those down in the comments and I will get back to you as soon as possible. But don't forget, if you're new around here, please do consider subscribing so there's more videos coming like this on the channel very, very soon. But for now, this has been my ultimate video test for the Oppo Find X3 Pro. My name's Dave West, and I'll catch you guys later.